Hello and welcome to the romance track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about medical romance, doctors, EMTs, nurses, all those great hospital people that fall in love on the job, or maybe off the job, or maybe with the patient. We don't know, but we're going to find out. So before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Jeanne.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeanne Adams. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott.
Okay, Becke.
I'm Becke Turner. I write contemporary romance, typically sweet romance, small town.
Okay, Liv.
Hi, I'm Liv Rancourt, and I write historical and paranormal romance, and sometimes at the same time, historical and paranormal romance.
That works. Hey.
Hi, I'm Kevin Coles, and I write contemporary romance primarily, but also paranormal romance.
Okay. And I'm Gail Martin and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So let's talk about what's so romantic about protagonists in the medical field. I mean, I grew up with reruns of Tammy and the Doctor, so I know there's something here. And then we've all seen umpteen episodes of Grey's Anatomy. So, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. What is it about the medical community that's just Dr. Sexy? Jeanne?
Well, I think part of it is that life and death immediacy. And it's not been quite as popular as it used to be in the Harlequin dominates every romance in the genre days. That used to be a mainstay back then. But I think it's still, I mean, you know, Chicago, the Chicago Fire, Chicago Hope, that whole series, Grey's Anatomy still going on. I think that shows that it's still a mainstay because it's life and death. It's adrenaline rushes. It's holding life in the palm of your hand. I think it's even
and
if
then
there
like bunnies afterwards. Yes,
exactly.
Becke?
I think another aspect would be that readers can identify it. I think every reader has been in some kind of a medical emergency or experienced some, like the joy of a new child, the trauma of having a child that's ill. And so I think there's, an automatic connection there too that kind of helps the writer out a little bit too.
Okay. How about you, Liv?
So I'm at the wrong panel because I don't particularly often read medical romance because it makes me want to throw my Kindle at the wall. And I am a nurse practitioner in a Seattle hospital. So the TV show that's based on medical residents here in Seattle, I just, no, I live with them. They're nothing like that. So
they're just not that sexy.
They're just really not. I mean, now and then you'd get up to some shenanigans. I mean, not me personally, but see it happen. But yeah, no. So I'm clearly I signed up for the wrong. But I can tell you where people get things wrong.
That works. That works. Stick around. We can use that. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Liv, for please correct us all when we're doing the wrong things. I would love to hear more about that. I'm going to actually agree with everything that has been said, Jeanne and Becke, but also I think dovetailing a little bit on what Becke said, it's relatable to a lot of people to talk about people who work certainly to me anyway, it's people who work in the community, people who are enduring some kind of a health crisis. It is something that people go through. So it's easy to kind of look at a plot and say, oh yeah, I can apply that to my life, which I think helps a lot in terms of connecting with the characters.
It's changed over time. Back in the days of the Tammy and the Doctor movies, it was definitely that marry a doctor, he'll provide for you well, he'll make a good living, you'll live in a nice house. That was kind of the pinnacle that girls were kind of pushed toward, for marry a doctor. And fortunately we've gotten away from that. But I think there's also kind of the hero aspect especially when you get into the EMTs, the firemen who also do a lot of medic stuff, maybe the Army medics, the doctors. It's not just romance between people working at a hospital. My dad was a surgeon. I agree with Liv. That just, when you've been working an 80 or 90-hour week, some things are just the last thing on your mind. And the spirit might be willing, but the flesh wants to sleep. So, the reality is a lot less sexy. But I think there is kind of the hero worship that these are people who run into the fire, who show up at the terrible accident, who, run into the emergency room ready to save somebody's life, and it's all very heroic. And if you've had good experiences with the medical community, that reinforces the hero aspect. And I think that's part of the appeal. Every romantic trope is drawing on something that speaks to us as far as, an ideal. So now that we've, mentioned some of what makes the trope function, what are some of the books or movies or TV shows that you've seen that have used this in any of its formats, any kind of healer to a romantic advantage? Jeanne?
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously, we've already mentioned Grey's Anatomy, and then there's ER and so many of the others. I think that the advantage is, and you all have all mentioned it, is that it's so immediately recognizable. And so as a trope, it pulls everybody in. You don't have to explain the setting. You don't have to explain what the people are doing. You don't have to get bogged down in technical terms. It's not like CSI where you have to explain all that crap. It's just everybody kind of knows that there's stuff that goes on. So I think that things like ER, things like Chicago Hope, things like Chicago Fire, 911, that one is 911 and 911 Lone Star. You've got two of them. Yeah. And the hard bodies, really, it's eye candy for the most part. I have yet to meet a fireman who looks like that, by the way, just saying. And Liv, my sister, was an RN, and she worked in a major hospital, and then she was a farmer rep. And so I heard about some of the shenanigans, but I also heard about the oh yeah, no, so not that way.
Yeah, no.
Becke, what about you?
Well, I've been in medicine for, I don't want to tell you how many years, and a lot of different aspects on it. And I worked at almost every specialty there was. And I also did Medicare policy for 20 or 30 years. I don't see, in my experience, there wasn't any, yeah, you had flirting and you had this kind of thing, and you did have physician problems. We call him Dr. Hand. You had that stuff going on, especially when I was just a little young thing. But so that part to me isn't as sexy, and I like to have the facts right. So a lot of times when I'm watching some of these movies and stuff, it annoys me because they don't get their facts right. And it's something that's easy enough to check. They have physician consultants or whoever's on there. So they have these consultants. But I like the drama in medicine. I like the science of it. So to me, that is very interesting. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't write it for a long time. I've only written recently. I wrote one, and that was because of the ethical dilemma in it. And everybody sees it as black and white, and everybody thinks that medicine is a lot farther along than it actually is. So to me, I thought that was a compelling conflict, or a compelling, plot, was to have them say, okay, let's talk about the medical ethics. And there's no right or wrong on some of this stuff. It's
right.
It's just it's very subjective. So that to me made a good trope and a good conflict between the two characters. So that was part of the medicine that I thought was interesting.
My sister used to hate, the one she really hated was ER, because she said they got so many things wrong.
And it's just like, oh my God.
Consistently, constantly, every episode, there was at least one thing where she wanted to throw a shoe at the TV.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But my favorite, I love The Good Doctor, and because I like In House was another one, because the diagnostics on it, I was always trying to outguess them and say, okay, which kind of which scenario was this, So that was kind of fun to me, but that most people are not going to find too terribly interesting in a story. Well, maybe they will. Who knows that part of it? But it's just like anything else. It's a subjective. What's interesting to me is going to be interesting to some readers there, and then other readers are going to say, "You got to be kidding me." So,
Okay, Liv.
So, just as an aside, I read a book that I will not name, that the hero was a surgeon, and he had 2 weekends off in a row. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
nah,
no.
Yeah, right.
shit.
Not in today's America. No.
Well, and he was supposed to be relatively young. So, and she never really said, was he like doing a surgical fellowship? Was he, where was he in the academic process? In which case, even less likely he'd have 2 weekends off in a row. But anyway, I think if I was going, what's that?
I said, it'd be kind of hard to date. You never have a weekend off.
I don't know, man. Anyway, I think if I was going to recommend, and I can't think of a title of a book, and I just did a quick search and I can't think of it. If I was going to recommend someone read a book that featured some kind of medical practitioner, I would lean more towards fantasy and like a healer. Someone who would work outside the traditions of modern American medicine, because I just have, honestly, I don't know that I don't watch much TV, so I've never watched House, and I don't have the patience to see things done incorrectly. My sister does costumes for movies and television, and more than once I've gotten a phone call saying, so would this character actually wear like scrubs at this point? And I'm like, Jesus, if that's how you're getting your medical research, there's a problem.
Hey, how about you?
So I realized not long ago that my parents really like both police procedurals and also medical procedurals. So I grew up watching them, and I was one time with a friend listing all of the different shows that I watched with first responders, and she was like, I think you have a problem. And I was like, I think I do too. I'm not even upset about this problem. So I do watch a lot of that stuff, but Liv just said something about, if you're going to recommend something, maybe go like fantasy. I would go sci-fi for the same reason, because it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. If I'm watching Star Trek and someone pulls out, a tricorder and heals someone magically, I'm like, yes, of course, that's great. I think that's a really fun thing to be able to watch and certainly experience. I did watch House. I thought it was a good show because the character was super compelling, very flawed, right? So that's the thing I like about medical like plots, actually, or storylines. If the characters are in some way flawed, I'm very interested, because these people have jobs where they're taking care of people and they're so messed up, and I'm just like, yes, tell me more. So that says a lot about me, probably, but I do think that makes for an interesting story and interesting characters, because these are just people. They're the whole thing about, these are heroes. They're still people, and they still have flaws, and they still have problems. So I find that to be very compelling and interesting. I don't even know if I answered the question, but anyway.
You did.
I think that's what makes the 911 so compelling, is all of them are three-dimensional people, and they all have character flaws and issues, and none of them are like a hard body, right? None of them are like flex dudes, right? And so that is a much more compelling, and like with House, the super flawed and
Oh,
crank,
yes.
cranky.
So what an amazing character. I don't know of any other shows that I've watched since then that have captured somebody who was so smart and so screwed up at the same time. And if you knew him, would you just want to punch him in the face all the time? Probably.
Yes.
Like, what is wrong
Probably.
with you? Get it together.
Be nice to people, for crying out loud. They did it a little bit with Elemental, the sort of Sherlock Holmesian
Oh
one.
yeah.
But House just sort of takes the cake on that. And I'm not sure anybody could have pulled that off but Hugh Laurie.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was really, I think that was sort of lightning in a bottle for a TV show anyway. And also it did sometimes you'd be like, of course they're, because Liv hasn't watched it, but like one of his catchphrases was people lie. And you could see it coming, like he was going to say it and you're like, say the line. But it was always about like, so let's diagnose this weird thing that's happening. It's going to be lupus or not. And then because it was people were not truthful, again, bringing all of those flaws in and kind of looking at, what is making these people tick or not? And why are they so messed up?
Yeah, we have a friend who is a family practice doctor who also writes fantasy novels. And we have heard at length about shows that did not do things right and his utter frustration with them. And, the guy has lost gallons of blood. He's dead. He's dead. He's just dead. You can't shock him back to life. He's dead.
He took a fragmenting bullet.
And we pat him on the shoulder and say, deep breath.
Okay. Yeah. He took a fragmenting bullet to the chest, right near the heart. He's dead.
Yeah, he's very, very dead. Well, this isn't a conventional romance, but there was some romance in it, and it was in the medical field. And this is going back a ways to All Creatures Great and Small.
Oh,
I
love
loved that show.
Yes.
And before he was the Fifth Doctor, Peter Davidson was
James
Tristan
Harriet.
in
He's Tristan, yeah.
in All Creatures Great and Small. But just, they're veterinarians in the countryside in England after World War II. So there's some new things that are coming out like antibiotics, but there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted that they didn't have. So they're doing things the old fashioned way, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But as a character study, again, the characters were so vibrant and so real and very memorable. It's been decades, and we still joke about when they told Mrs. Pomfries to take her fat little Pomeranian for more exercise. And so she had her butler walk him around on she took Tricky Woo out every day, but it was the butler carrying him on a cushion. Tricky Woo's little paws were not touching the ground. And our kids have never seen the show, but they know about Tricky Woo. So, I think I think that the life and death stakes, whether it's people or animals, and I have read some really compelling romances with veterinarians, and usually it ends up being a shifter that they don't know is a shifter, and so that gets complicated real fast because but I when you get those memorable personalities that stay in your mind for years later, that's a real success no matter what genre it is. So have you written any healer characters? Now, maybe not a traditional physician or EMT, but somebody who has some kind of healing ability, either magical or they're just that person that fixes everything. And how does that factor into a romance? Jeannie?
Well, I haven't really written someone that's a healer. I've read a lot that I really enjoyed, like there are several healer characters in Jennifer Estep's series. And then Barb Hindy's series, Witches series, has got a couple of healers in it that are very effective and very, very wonderfully rendered. I have in my Witches series, which is in the thing behind me, I do have people who are like kitchen witches and do a lot of like healing magic in the smaller sense, you know, skin knees, we can help you with that, you know, kind of thing. But I've not yet written a healer that really is life and death stakes and those sorts of things. I do love reading it, but I haven't written it yet.
Okay, Becky.
I haven't written a healer. I wrote an oncologist, but I have not written a healer.
Okay.
That counts.
I mean, that counts. That's somebody in the healing.
Counts.
profession.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I've written one. And again, that was on the medical ethics on a quality of life versus maintaining hope. Where's the line?
It was a slight disagreement over a chew toy.
Oh. I think that's actually really a great intersection, though, to bring into a book and to bring into a romance, especially because that's so timely.
It's a very difficult you know, the reason it came up was I had lost my dad, and all my life I had been very much quality of life. I've done a lot of I did a lot of hospice. I did a lot of end of life teaching with my patients, and so I was very much along that line. And when you get to, you know, what's good quality of life, but then the other issue of it, and I've got a real good friend that's an oncologist, is that you never want to give your patients, you always want them to have hope. So there's the fine line is, you know, you know, as an oncologist, you're not usually going to cure the disease. You're going to manage a cancer. You're not going to cure it. But you don't want, you know, if you've got somebody with negligible hopes for prognosis, where's that line? Where's that? And that was the whole conflict in my story. And it was an oncologist nurse and an oncologist. And that was the whole battle between it. So that was you know, like I said, it was a personal story, and then it, you know, I just thought of a way to make it as a romance.
Okay, Liv.
So my book Lost and Found, it's an MM romance set in 1920 Paris, and the tagline is, "A dancer who cannot dance and a physician who cannot heal must find in each other the way to love." And the physician character was an army doc in World War I, and he obviously was very traumatized and has what we would call now PTSD, although at the time they called it shell shock. It was a different, you know,
or battle
so,
fatigue.
Yeah, battle fatigue. That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah. That was an interesting. I liked working on that character because I liked researching the history of medicine and like digging up his over the course of the story. You know, outside of the romance, he is staying in a rooming house, and he's one of his neighbors gets sick, and the house mother, the landlady, comes and gets him and says, "You have to go up to her room and see what's," you know. So he ends up easing his way back into the practice of medicine by helping his neighbors and figuring out, okay, so if you were presented with a patient in clearly florid heart failure who has no money, and what would you do in 1920? You know, what would you prescribe? And, you know, sort of digging out the medical textbooks to see what that was interesting. And I felt comfortable doing that in a way that I wouldn't have necessarily if the setting had been in 2020, you know. So yeah, I've done a fair amount of, I have an idea for a story set in like late 1890s, early 1900s hospitals in Seattle, because I've done some research about the origins of or the early premature baby care. I mean, that's my field is neonatology. So, you know, looking at how they used to take care of preemies, which they really didn't back in those days. But anyway, so that someday I might play with that and try and find a story there. But so history of medicine.
Okay, Kay.
I have not done a lot with with a healer, but I have done a bunch with nurses actually, who I feel like it's, you know, a lot of people say they're the people who really make the
Just say.
hospitals and healthcare run, right? So they're often the first person that a patient sees. They're often the last person that a patient sees. They're there the whole time the doctor is like in and out, in and out. They're really the people who are making healthcare work. So to me, they're often overlooked, and I think a very important kind of character that we can all research a lot more, get to know a lot better.
You know, I think that my sister's experience had one of the reasons I think she went into being a pharma rep was you get both expected to know absolutely everything the doctor knows and then some, and yet you get 1/3 of the pay and 1/3 of the respect, if that. And I think you're right, Kay. That's probably a great cauldron of conflict too, especially with a nurses shortage these days.
Yeah, they're like on the front lines in so many ways. And often, as you said, they're overlooked and underappreciated, which I think is a huge mistake, and we can do a lot better.
Yeah, I've got an EMT in my Fox Hollow series, so that's shifters. And Russ is a Fox, but he's a mechanic, and then he's a part-time EMT with the volunteer fire department. And I think one of my favorite interactions is when his boyfriend Liam, who is a Fox shifter and also the local librarian, calls him panicked because he was interviewing someone for a job and the guy fainted. Well, they don't know yet that the guy is a fainting goat shifter, and he got stressed out.
Fainting goat. That's great.
Give me a second as I pass off the film.
And the puppy faints.
Yeah, really. But as an EMT, how would you deal with that? That's just like, okay, the guy passed out. Well, there's a logical explanation. He's
Okay, that was adorable.
And so Liam thinks he's killed the guy. Oh no, I was interviewing this guy and he fell over. And actually he got so stressed with the interview that his fainting goat, nature took over and he just, fell over. And it's all good. But that was one of my favorites because Ruff is the good guy who always shows up to help. Pardon the comments from the gallery over here, but Pip has opinions. But the other thing that I notice is we watch a lot of Korean romances, and the trope that is so common in Korean romances is amnesia, or they think somebody's a ghost, and so the main character falls in love with this ghost, but it's hopeless because she's dead and he's alive, and then it turns out that she is actually mostly dead, but not completely dead. She's in a coma. And because she's in a coma, she's sort of straddling that thing between life and death. So her spirit has gone wandering, trying to find usually the person who was the hit and run driver, or whoever tried to kill her or whatever. And so in the end, he finds out as she miraculously wakes up that she isn't dead. And so they can have happily ever after, since now they're both alive. So it's a fun trope. We haven't seen that done in American TV for a long time ago. For a long time, we kind of consider the whole amnesia coma thing to be, okay, it's a little overdone, but it's a standard thing in the Korean dramas. And it's coming, and it's like, I bet she's not really dead. But
all I can think of is Spam-A-Lot. I am not dead yet.
Yeah. It's coming, but it still works somehow because we all agree to that suspension of belief. And of course, she wakes up after like a 5-year coma with no muscle atrophy. She looks great. Somebody has been doing her hair, and she just jumps out of bed and she's fine. But hey, this is fantasy, so we're all going for it.
There was an American movie using that. It was Mark Ruffalo and the Sweet Home Alabama, the lawyer movie.
Reese Witherspoon?
Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
And she's like a high-powered, she's a doctor. And she ends up getting hit and she's in a coma and they're getting ready to pull the plug. And the ticking clock as they're getting ready to pull the plug because she's been in this coma. And he's subletting her apartment. And the meet cute is he's subletting the apartment. She shows, he's like got a cup of coffee and she's like, what are you doing in my apartment? And she tries to grab the mug and he drops the mug and coffee goes everywhere. And so it's this whole, and it's actually a super cute movie and something you were to go to your point, Becke, it actually is talking a lot about the underlying theme is about compassionate care and end of life care. And when do you decide? How do you decide? That the time has come. And there's a whole lot of undertones to it that the comedy in the movie kind of brings you through it without you feeling like it's this super heavy topic. And Reese Witherspoon is just adorable.
Yes, she
all
is.
all the way around. And Mark Ruffalo being a romantic lead is kind of fun because we don't usually get to see. He kind of ends up being the sort of oh gosh, aw shucks kind of guy in a lot of things. So having him be the romantic lead was kind of fun in that one too. But I hadn't thought about that one as a medical drama until you were talking about that, Becke, with end of life care.
Well,
Now,
and
you have to go
honestly,
find out what the movie is.
if you go back to While You Were Sleeping, the movie,
Yeah.
there's one in American theater with, oh my, he's in a coma. And it doesn't come out
It's a
quite.
good movie.
It is a good movie. It's got Bill Pullman, and I love Bill Pullman, but it uses that coma aspect and some of the mistaken identity and 50 First Dates, with the the short-term memory loss where it's new to her all over again. And how do you get somebody to fall in love with you when they don't remember you from yesterday? So I'm sure both of those played exceptionally fast and loose with the clinical details, but it made for an entertaining love story.
Right. What was the Goldie Hawn and Kirk when she falls off the overboard?
Overboard, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yep.
pretty cute. Where she doesn't remember who she is, and
I just watched that recently for some reason and
Yeah.
thought this movie's really funny.
it is. It's cute.
I also think too that Kurt Russell is kind of an underrated actor
Oh yeah.
and pretty hot. So there's
Yes.
that.
He was great in that playing the builder. When you were I think Liv was talking about the historical medicine. Remember the Jeanne books?
Yeah.
I love those just because of the ancient medicine on that, and she had done a lot of background work on that, and I thought that was terribly fascinating. Those are very long books, but they held my interest because of that.
And that's Clan of the Cape Bear.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that there was 3 of them. I don't.
God, I think it was 40 years ago that I read that, but yes.
Yeah. Been a while.
That far back. Come on, was it that old?
I
Maybe.
remember it as college, and
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 1980, so do the math.
Okay.
That movie with Reese Witherspoon, Lord, I cannot say that word. Those words tonight. It's called Just Like Heaven.
I have to watch that. That sounds cute. I haven't.
Yeah, it is super cute.
I think so.
I was just thinking, I'm so the idea of a historical medical thing is so daunting because I tend to go down rabbit holes with research anyway. Sometimes I'm like writing, like, what am I doing? Why am I even talking about this? But then,
Come into the light.
yeah, going into that, like down another rabbit hole of historical medical research. Oof, I could go there forever. I'd never come out probably.
I did. You guys, I went to a reenactment, a Civil War reenactment, and they had a medical tent, and then they had some of the ancient, I'll say that, ancient tools. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
A little freaky, isn't it?
It is. It's frightening. It looked more like, some kind of medieval torture system, but I mean, that was medicine. And how many people did we bleed thinking we were going to fix someone? That's an amazing type of, I don't even know where they came up with that fine idea.
Yeah, really.
It's
I don't know if it was
sort of amazing any of us are here,
Yeah.
that we didn't die off quite a
Really
while
is.
ago.
Yeah.
talking about winning the lottery, man.
Yeah, I assume it has something to do with the humors and all of that, which is
Yeah.
just like when you start to read those things, certainly I do. I'm like, thank God I don't have to deal with that at least.
I'm trying to
My
remember
motto
the
is
name.
don't let them lift the hood. In the old days, you never took, when you took your car in, and if you went to the gas station, you never had them open the hood. Because that's when all the scams would happen. So that's my idea now with medicine. It's just, I don't let anybody lift the hood on me.
Liv, you were going to say something.
I'm trying to find, scanning my Pinterest really quickly, because there's a book on Lister on the history of antisepsis and sterile technique. And I'm pulling a blank on the author's name. But God, it was fascinating. She goes into Victorian medicine and the whole idea that your skill as a surgeon was tied to how fast you could amputate a limb.
Mm-hmm.
And they could take a leg off in like less than 2 minutes because they had to, because otherwise
you die.
she would bleed to death, because they had to, tie off the arteries as fast as possible. I can't remember. Oh God, this is going to bother me for the rest of the damn night.
Well, Kay, if you want a research rabbit hole that was really cool and fun, it's a nonfiction book. It's called The Ghost Map. It's about how they solved dysentery. And
Ooh, that sounds
it's
great.
not dysentery. I'm missing the right one. It's diphtheria.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
I may still not have it right, but I'll look it up. But it's one of those. It's like a mystery, like solving the mystery. It's really great.
That's great. Thank you.
You found it, Liv?
Yeah, The Butchering Art by Lindsay
Okay.
Fitzharris.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
it's well worth the read. She's done another one since then on the history of facial reconstructive surgery as it evolved during and after World War I, because so many men came back missing their chins or missing other parts of their, and I bought the hard copy and I haven't been able to get myself to open it yet because some of the images are pretty graphic.
Yeah.
Now, Jeannie, this is, maybe medical adjacent, but you've got some experience with the funeral home business.
Yeah.
And there are definitely some funeral home romances. I'm thinking going all the way back to Forever Night. His beloved was the coroner.
Yeah.
And I think, iZombie's got some romance in it. So any thoughts on that intersection of mortician and romance?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I teach a class on body disposal for writers because I used to be in the funeral business. And, as Becke and Liv were talking about, and being in the medical field or medical adjacent, people get it wrong and you just want to bang your head on the desk. So I started teaching this class because I had seen people really get it wrong. And even in just sort of somebody setting up a funeral as the start to the book, right? Or having a funeral in the book, and they get everything wrong. And all they would have to do is make one phone call and it would be so easy to fix it. But in terms of romance, Pushing Daisies and 6 Feet Under, they both had romantic elements. But let me just be quick to say that you cannot drive a hearse stoned. Just saying. They're too big a vehicle and first of all, they're too expensive. And really, really hard to drive. They're like driving an RV. Even though they are a Cadillac usually. Don't do that stone, please. But both of those had that adjacency. And I get tickled sometimes thinking about Men in Black, because that was the ME. And all the way back to, was it Quincy ME?
Oh yeah.
There was always sort of a couple romantic threads, running through there. And so it is medical adjacent, but you don't get them as much in romance, because people are like death, despair. But in mystery, you get it.
Mhm.
You get it where there's the funeral home people who are doing the mystery, or that's somebody who's covering things up, or they're an element of the mystery. So that's always fun. And unfortunately, people don't do their research most of the time.
Well, no, it also
As you
works if the object of your affection is already dead, like a vampire
Right.
or a zombie.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of positioning yourself to be, or maybe a kitsune who needs to devour hearts or livers. You have a supply. So it really kind of depends on the object of your affection.
Yes. And they're not using them anymore. So
It's
There's no
recycling.
guilt.
It's responsible sourcing.
yes. Recycling
Recycling.
even.
All right, folks.
It's so
Even
romantic.
composting. That's great.
Yes. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We have run out of time, but before we leave, I want everybody to have a chance to say where we can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, please tell us about it, starting with Jeanne.
Well, you can find me at jeanneadams.com. And when I teach the body disposal class, it's usually up on my website, or on my social medias, which are most of the social medias. I spend way too much time still on the Bird X app and Instagram, but I usually post when I'm teaching classes and when I have new releases. My most recent release, I have 2 novellas that were released earlier this year. One is in 11 Valentines at Canham Castle, and another was in Midsummer Mischief at Canham Castle, which I also am in with Gail. And forthcoming in November, I'm very excited to say that I am in the 17th Mercedes Lackey Valdemar anthology that's coming out November 28th.
Very good. Becke.
Yeah, you can find me at becketurner.com, and I spell my name with an E, so it's BECKE Turner.com. Turner is pretty easy. And I've got my book is going to come out. My latest one will come out September the 25th. But it's not on medicine. It's on another thing that I guess is one of my expertise, and it's about a horse trainer.
Cool.
Very good. Liv?
I can be found at livrancourt.com. I am on most social media apps, most recently Threads, the offshoot of Instagram, at livrancourt. I still am on the Bird app, I think, but I haven't paid nearly as much attention. And TikTok has been my newest evolutionary step, or one of my newest evolutionary steps. So all of those places under some variation of Liv Rancourt. And my newest release is The Lighthouse Keeper, and I am inordinately proud of this cover. It is a
Love it.
Victorian Gothic, opposites attract, slow burn, grumpy sunshine, one bed situation with witches and magic and heat.
Awesome. And that is a gorgeous cover.
I like all those tropes, Liv.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm kevincoles.com. I'm on most of the socials as well, including Threads. I am not a TikToker, but who knows, someday. I should have a new release coming out in September, and it will be EMTs who are rivals, and then there will be more. Following that whole obsession with first responders, I just can't help myself. So that should be September. I'm excited about that. It'll be called Color You In.
Cool. I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. All the social medias are a variation of those. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. The new book is on pre-order right now. It is launching August 23rd, and it is a Roustabout, which is my book in the multi-author Shared World Carnival of Mysteries series. So really excited to be in that series. And Liv, you're in it too, aren't you? No, okay.
No, but think of me next time. Yeah.
Okay. Spooky Carnival, what's not to love. So that is coming out soon. Well, folks, because As I usually say, most of the time you can find me here on Continual. Well, folks, thank you so much for being here tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance on Continual, so we'll see you online.